The rain hammered the riverbank like 1,000 fists, turning the earth into a slick, unforgiving mire. Elena Vargas stood at the edge of her makeshift barrier, her boots sinking into the mud as she surveyed the flood wall she'd poured her savings and her sanity into building. It wasn't much, a sturdy berm of reinforced concrete and sandbags, stretching along the crumbling riverside where her family's old warehouse squatted like a forgotten relic. The Varga River had been rising for weeks, swollen by upstream dams bursting under the weight of endless storms, but the city planners had dismissed her warnings. "Flood control's not your lane, Ms. Vargas," they'd said, their voices dripping with bureaucratic indifference. She was just an engineer scraping by on freelance gigs, not some big-shot contractor with pull. Across the churning water, on the opposite bank, the sprawling estate of Victor Russo loomed like a crown of arrogance. His mansion, a fortress of glass and steel perched on manicured cliffs, overlooked the river as if it owned the flow itself. Russo, the so-called kingpin of the docks, ran his empire from there, shipping manifests that hid more than cargo, whispers of rival crews skimming off his routes. Elena had heard the stories, how he'd muscled out competitors with a smile and a veiled threat, how his personal code meant he never dirtied his hands but always collected his due. Tonight, as thunder cracked overhead, she spotted movement on his side, floodlights sweeping the grounds, guards in dark suits patrolling the perimeter. Russo himself stood on his balcony, a silhouette against the glow, laughing into the gale. The sound carried faintly over the roar, mocking her efforts. Her wall was a joke to him, a pathetic stand against nature's fury. But Elena didn't build it for laughs. Her father had lost everything to a flood like this 20 years ago, the river claiming their home and his life in one cruel surge. She'd sworn never again, not for herself, not for the neighbors huddled in the lowlands below. As the water lapped higher, inches from her barrier, she tightened her rain-slick jacket and checked the makeshift sensors she'd rigged. Simple pressure gauges linked to her phone, alerting her to breaches. The air smelled of wet stone and diesel from distant barges, the kind that Russo's men unloaded under cover of night. She wiped rain from her eyes, ignoring the chill seeping into her bones. Pride kept her here, but so did necessity. If the wall held, it might buy time for the evacuation she'd coordinated with the local aid groups. The laughter from across the river cut short as a deeper rumble echoed, not thunder, but the groan of the river shifting. Elena's phone buzzed, alert from the upstream gauge. The water was cresting faster than predicted, a wall of brown fury barreling down. She scrambled to reinforce a weak spot, piling more sandbags, her muscles burning under the strain. Headlights pierced the storm from Russo's drive, tires crunching gravel as a black SUV sped toward the water's edge. It was him, stepping out with an umbrella held by a burly aide, his face twisted not in mirth now, but calculation. Even from here she could see the flicker of alarm in his eyes as the river surged, testing her barrier like a beast at the gate. By dawn, the unthinkable happened. Elena's wall held, barely. The floodwaters roared against it, foaming and clawing, but the concrete didn't yield. On her side, the warehouse trembled but stood, shielding the cluster of homes downstream. Cheers rose from the evacuees gathered at a safe distance, their voices a fragile counterpoint to the storm's dying growl. But across the river, chaos reigned. The surge had undercut Russo's cliffs, the once solid bank eroding in greedy bites. His mansion teetered, glass cracking as the foundation shifted, water swallowing the manicured lawns and lapping at the lower walls. Sirens wailed from the city, but they were too late for the opulent sprawl that symbolized his power. Elena watched from her side, exhaustion pulling at her like the receding tide. Guards swarmed the estate, ferrying crates and files into armored vans. Whatever secrets Russo couldn't afford to lose. He emerged again, barking orders, his tailored coat muddied, the kingpin reduced to a man fighting the elements. Their eyes met across the divide, a spark of something electric cutting through the rain. Gratitude? Resentment? She couldn't tell. But when his aide thrust a satellite phone to his ear, nodding toward her, Elena's gut twisted. This wasn't over. Russo didn't strike her as the type to forget a debt or a slight. Hours later, as the sun broke through ragged clouds, a sleek black sedan pulled up to her warehouse. The driver, a stone-faced man in a crisp suit, stepped out holding a card. "Mr. Russo requests your presence," he said, voice flat as the drying mud. "Dinner, tonight, to discuss. Compensation." Elena took the card, embossed with gold lettering that screamed old money and older threats. Compensation for saving his empire, or a summons into the viper's nest. She glanced back at the river, now sullen and low, the wall scarred but intact. Curiosity burned hotter than caution. Her father had taught her to stand firm, but he'd also warned about men like Russo, those who laughed until the water rose, then claimed what they wanted. She pocketed the card. The weight of it, like a key to a door she wasn't sure she wanted to open. As the sedan drove off, she noticed a glint in the tree line. A scope? A camera? Paranoia, maybe. But in Russo's world, nothing was coincidence. What had she really saved? And at what cost would he make her pay it back? The river whispered its secrets to the wind, but Elena knew some answers would come only from crossing to the other side. Elena stepped out of the shower, the steam curling around her like a reluctant embrace, carrying the faint scent of river mud that no amount of scrubbing could fully erase. Her small apartment above the warehouse felt smaller tonight, the walls pressing in with the echo of the day's chaos. The card from Russo's man lay on the kitchen counter, its edges sharp under the harsh fluorescent light. Compensation, he'd called it. But Elena knew better. Men like Victor Russo didn't offer gifts without strings. Still, curiosity gnawed at her, sharper than the chill wind rattling the window panes. Her freelance engineering work had dried up with the floods, bills piling like the sandbags she'd hauled. And there was the look in his eyes across the river. Not just calculation, but something raw, almost human. She dressed simply, a black blouse and jeans, practical armor against whatever game this was, then grabbed her keys. The drive to the restaurant was a descent into Russo's domain. The black sedan arrived precisely at 7, its engine purring like a predator at rest. The same stone-faced driver held the door, his eyes hidden behind mirrored shades even in the dusk. "Ms. Vargas," he said, voice clipped. "Mr. Russo appreciates your time. No pleasantries, no questions." Elena slid into the leather seat, the scent of polished hide and faint cologne enveloping her. The car pulled away smoothly, headlights cutting through the twilight mist rising from the river. She watched the familiar lowlands recede in the side mirror. Her warehouse, scarred but standing, the flood wall a jagged line against the water's edge. Sodium lamps flickered on along the docks, casting orange pools on wet asphalt, where workers in oilskins unloaded crates under the watchful eyes of armed overseers. Russo's world, she realized, wasn't just the mansion. It was the veins of the city, pulsing with hidden cargo. As they crossed the bridge, the city skyline sharpened, towers of glass and steel rising like sentinels. Elena's phone buzzed in her pocket. A text from her neighbor, Maria, thanking her again for the wall that kept their homes dry. But then another alert. A low battery warning from her flood sensors. She frowned, checking the app. The upstream gauge was offline, its signal dead. Coincidence? Or someone tampering? She glanced at the driver, but he stared straight ahead, hands steady on the wheel. The car turned onto a private drive, lined with iron gates that swung open without a word, as if the vehicle itself was recognized. Cameras dotted the treetops, red lights winking like distant stars. Surveillance, she thought, her pulse quickening. Not paranoia. Precaution in a life built on secrets. The restaurant was a jewel in the crown of the waterfront district, La Riva, perched on a pier extending into the calmer bay. its windows offering panoramic views of the river's mouth where it met the sea. Valets in crisp uniforms took the car, and the driver escorted her inside, past a velvet rope where lesser patrons waited. The air inside was warm, laced with garlic and aged wine, jazz piano notes floating from a corner stage. Crystal chandeliers cast a golden haze over linen-draped tables, but Elena's eyes scanned for exits. 2 doors to the kitchen, a fire escape visible through the glass. Habits from flood zones died hard. Russo rose from a corner booth as she approached, his presence commanding the space like gravity. He was taller than she'd imagined, broad-shouldered in a charcoal suit that screamed custom tailoring, a single silver cufflink glinting under the light. No tie, just an open collar revealing a faint scar at the base of his throat. Knife work, maybe, or an old accident. "Ms. Vargas," he said, extending a hand, his grip firm but not crushing. "You have my thanks, and my apology for the unorthodox invitation." His voice was smooth, laced with a faint accent. Sicilian roots, the rumors said, carrying the weight of authority without the bluster. "Elena," she corrected, sliding into the seat opposite. A waiter materialized with a bottle of Chianti, pouring without asking. "And it wasn't unorthodox, just direct. Your mansion took a hit. I'm guessing the compensation is for that." She kept her tone even, probing for cracks in his facade. He chuckled, low and genuine, leaning back as the first course arrived, seared scallops on a bed of greens, the ocean's brine cutting through the richness. "Direct is how I operate. No games unless necessary. Your wall. It held the flood back from the lowlands, but the surge undercut my property line. Engineers are scrambling even now." His eyes met hers, dark and assessing, like he was measuring her not just as a savior, but a potential ally, or threat. "The city owes you. I owe you more. But let's not talk business yet. Tell me about the wall. How did you know it would work when everyone else laughed?" Elena sipped the wine, its warmth spreading against the knot in her stomach. She recounted the build, the concrete mix reinforced with local gravel, the sandbag anchors calculated for peak flow rates from historical data. He listened intently, nodding at technical details, but she caught the subtle tells. A glance toward the window, where the river lapped black and restless below. Outside, a barge horn sounded, distant and mournful, the hum of generators underscoring the pier's underbelly. "My father taught me," she finished, setting down her fork. "He lost everything to a flood like this. I wasn't going to let it happen again." Russo's expression softened, just a fraction. "Family. It's the only code that matters." He signaled for the next course, but as the waiter retreated, his phone vibrated on the table. He glanced at it, jaw tightening. "Excuse me." Stepping away to the balcony, he spoke in low tones, his back to her. Elena strained to hear. Fragments. "Manifests secure. Rivals sniffing. Double the watch." When he returned, the ease was gone, replaced by a coiled tension. "Old business," he said dismissively. "The docks never sleep." But Elena wasn't buying the brush off. As dessert arrived, a tiramisu dusted with cocoa, she spotted it. A faint discrepancy. The waiter's badge, clipped too loosely, bore a name that didn't match the one who'd served earlier. A switch? Or sloppy security? She filed it away, her engineer's mind mapping the inconsistencies like blueprints. Russo watched her, as if sensing her scrutiny. "You see things others miss," he said finally, his voice dropping. "That's why I wanted you here. Not just for thanks." The meal stretched, conversation weaving between flood logistics and veiled hints of his operations. Shipping routes strained by the storms, associates who'd profited from the chaos. Elena felt the pull, his world of power and peril clashing with her independence, the ethics that had her building walls instead of tearing them down. Yet there was an undercurrent, a possessiveness in how he leaned in, claiming her attention like territory. As they finished, he stood, offering his arm. "Let me see you out. The night's young, and the river's calm, for now." She accepted, but as they stepped onto the pier, a chill wind off the water carried a new sound. Tires crunching gravel too close, headlights sweeping the lot. Russo's hand tensed on her elbow, guiding her faster toward the sedan. "Stay close," he murmured, eyes scanning the shadows. Was it his men, or someone else's? The driver emerged, door open, but in the rear view as they pulled away, Elena glimpsed a tail, a nondescript van, hanging back just enough to blend. Surveillance or pursuit? Russo's code might protect innocence, but in his orbit, lines blurred fast. What shadows had she invited into her life by crossing that bridge? The sedan's tires hummed over the rain-slicked pavement, the city lights blurring into streaks as Victor Russo's driver accelerated through the waterfront district. Elena gripped the armrest, her gaze flicking to the side mirror where the nondescript van lingered. Its headlights dimmed but unmistakable, a shadow threading through traffic like a vein in the night. The air inside the car was thick with unspoken tension, the leather seats creaking faintly as Russo shifted beside her. His cologne, a subtle mix of sandalwood and storm, mingled with the faint metallic tang from the river seeping through the vents. "Old habits," Russo said, his voice low, eyes fixed on the road ahead. He didn't glance at the mirror, but his fingers drummed once on his knee. A tell, Elena noted, like a structural stress point in a failing beam. The docks breed watchers, rivals mostly. They think the floods washed away more than dirt. Elena turned to him, the booth's warmth already fading from her skin. "And you? Do you watch everyone?" She kept her tone light, but curiosity edged it, probing the man who'd laughed at her wall only to see his world teeter. The sedan weaved past a cluster of warehouses, their corrugated sides groaning under sodium lights that painted the asphalt in oily yellows. Distant cranes whirred, loading crates onto barges, the river's lap a constant undercurrent, smelling of brine and diesel exhaust. Russo's lips curved, not quite a smile. "Only those who matter. Your wall didn't just hold water, it exposed weaknesses. My property line's compromised. Surveyors say the erosion's deliberate, upstream diversions by a crew out of the east side. They laughed with me at first, then panicked when the surge hit." He paused, his gaze sliding to her. "You didn't panic. That's rare." The car slowed at a red light, the van closing the gap before peeling off into a side street, or so it seemed. Elena's engineer mind cataloged the details. Partial plate visible in the mirror, ending in 47X, the kind of generic rental that screamed burner vehicle. Her phone, tucked in her pocket, vibrated softly. Not the flood alerts this time, but a message from Maria. "Heard sirens near the docks. You okay?" She ignored it for now, focusing on Russo. Possessiveness flickered in his posture, the way he angled his body toward her, as if shielding a vital asset. It clashed with her instinct to bolt, to reclaim the autonomy of her warehouse and its scarred defenses. The light changed, and the driver gunned it, turning sharply onto a service road paralleling the river tunnels. Old smuggling routes, Elena recalled from city blueprints, now mostly for maintenance crews. The hum of the engine deepened, tires splashing through shallow puddles left by the receding flood. "Where are we going?" she asked, unease coiling like rebar in wet concrete. "Somewhere quiet," Russo replied. "My place is still a mess. Engineers like you would appreciate the irony. Water damage to the lower levels, files ruined, alarms shorted." He pulled out his phone, thumbing a quick text, the screen's glow illuminating the scar on his throat. A past loss, she wondered. Family, maybe, shaping his code of never letting innocence drown in the crossfire. But we need to talk about that upstream gauge of yours. Offline since this afternoon. Coincidence? Elena's breath caught. She'd dismissed it as storm interference, but now. You checked? How? The tunnel loomed ahead, its mouth a black maw framed by chain link and warning signs, the air growing cooler, laced with the musty drip of groundwater. Resources, he said simply, as the sedan plunged into the dim passage. Overhead lights flickered, casting elongated shadows that danced like guards on patrol. The driver's radio crackled faintly. Static, then a clipped voice. Clear ahead, boss. No tails. But Elena spotted it. A service alcove, half hidden, where a figure in coveralls lingered too long, wrench in hand but eyes on the passing car. A subtle behavioral tell. Posture too rigid, no actual work underway. The tunnel spat them out near a cluster of secure docks, where Russo's mansion rose in the distance, floodlights illuminating the scarred cliffs and temporary barriers of shipping containers stacked like a makeshift fortress. But they didn't head there. The car veered into a gated compound. A safe house, Elena guessed, low-slung and unassuming, ringed by motion sensors that beeped softly as they approached. Guards nodded from the shadows, earpieces humming with low chatter. Inside, the space was stark efficiency. Polished concrete floors, a wall of monitors displaying camera feeds from the riverbanks, the air humming with the whir of servers and the faint ozone of electronics. Russo gestured to a leather couch, facing a window overlooking the water, where barges ghosted past under cover of darkness. Sit. Coffee? A pot brewed on a side table, its rich aroma cutting the sterile chill. She nodded, sinking into the cushions as he poured 2 mugs. The monitors flickered, one showing her warehouse, the flood wall intact under moonlight. Surveillance. Her stomach tightened. You've been watching me. Protecting, he corrected, handing her the mug, steam rising like river mist. After the flood, threats surfaced. That van? East Side crew? Likely. They diverted water to hit me, but your wall bought us time. Now they're tying up loose ends. He sat across from her, close enough that she caught the faint lines of fatigue around his eyes. Legacy weighing heavy, a code tested by betrayal. Elena sipped the coffee, bitter and strong, her mind racing through logistics. Access codes for the gauges, perhaps hacked via a compromised upstream site. Guard rotations that allowed the alcove watcher. And I'm a loose end? Because I saw too much? His eyes darkened, a push-pull of loyalty and suspicion. No, because you matter now. Join me. Engineer my operations. Walls against more than water. The offer hung, autonomy clashing with the security he promised, ethics bending under the weight of his world. A buzzer sounded from the monitors. Proximity alert. Russo tensed, rising to check. The screen showed a boat idling too close to the docks, its outline familiar from shipping manifests she'd glimpsed in conversation. Compromised, he muttered, drivers feeding them intel. Outside, thunder rumbled anew, the river swelling with false alarm or real storm, lights flickering in a staged blackout that plunged the room into shadow. Elena's pulse raced as Russo grabbed a secure line, barking orders. Was the safe house truly safe, or had her crossing the bridge invited the flood inside? If you're enjoying this story so far, tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching from. The blackout swallowed the safe house in an instant, the monitors dying to black screens that reflected only the faint glow of emergency strips along the floor. Elena's mug slipped from her fingers, coffee splashing hot across the concrete as she shot to her feet. The room plunged into a humid chill, the whir of servers fading to a distant hum, replaced by the relentless patter of rain against the reinforced windows. Outside, the river's growl intensified, waves slapping the docks like accusations, the air thick with the metallic bite of ozone from the storm, or whatever sabotage had cut the power. Russo moved like a shadow, his silhouette crossing to a wall panel where he flipped a manual override. A red backup light flickered on, casting bloody hues over the sparse furnishings. "Generators kicking in," he said, voice steady, but edged with gravel, as if commanding the darkness itself. He grabbed a compact flashlight from a drawer, its beam slicing through the gloom to illuminate a secure cabinet. Inside, a ledger, discreet, leather-bound, sat amid stacks of burner phones, their screens dark but ready. "Stay here. Guards are sealing the perimeter." Elena ignored him, edging toward the window. Her heart hammered, autonomy warring with the instinct to map an escape. The door to the docks, maybe 20 paces, or the service tunnel access she'd spotted on entry. But Russo's world pulled her in, his possessiveness a current stronger than the flood. "Who's compromised?" she asked, voice low, piecing together the clues. The boat on the monitor, its silhouette matched a manifest Russo had mentioned earlier, a legitimate shipment delayed by the storms. The driver from dinner, perhaps, feeding coordinates via a tampered radio frequency. He paused, beam swinging to her face, eyes narrowing in the ruddy light. "One of mine. East Side's been infiltrating. Small tells, like the alcove watcher in the tunnel. Behavioral slip. He didn't signal the all-clear right." Russo's code flickered in his tone, loyalty tested by betrayal, the scar on his throat a reminder of past costs. He didn't elaborate, but Elena saw the weight. A personal loss, maybe a brother or mentor, drowned in some rival's diversion years back, forging his vow to shield the innocent from the undertow. The generator roared to life outside, a throaty diesel growl that vibrated the walls, lights stuttering back in patches. But the monitors stayed offline, feeds jammed. Deliberate, she realized. Human error or institutional limits bypassed by an insider's override code. Russo snatched a burner phone, dialing with quick thumbs. "Status." He barked into it. Static crackled, then a guard's voice. "Perimeter breach, boss. Boats unloading, 3 men armed. Drivers ghosted, vans theirs." Tires screeched faintly from the docks, a botched escort turning hostile, the rain masking footsteps like a conspirator. Elena's mind raced through logistics. The safe house's layout. Blueprints she'd glimpsed in her engineering scans of the area. Reinforced doors, but a weak point in the utility chase, accessible from the riverside. "The tunnel," she said, stepping closer to him, the push-pull electric in the confined space. "If they're coming from the water, we flank through maintenance. I know the schematics. Old flood drains connect to the main line." Russo's gaze locked on hers, suspicion yielding to grudging respect. "You don't run from this?" It wasn't a question, more a challenge, his hand brushing her arm, protective, possessive, clashing with her independence like rebar against concrete. "I build against it," she replied, the words tasting of her father's legacy. No easy outs. Victory demanded work. Exposure to the shadows she'd unwittingly stirred. He nodded once, grabbing the ledger and a compact pistol from the cabinet. Sleek, suppressed, no graphic intent, just the cold assurance of his code. "Lead," he said, and they moved. The service door groaned open to the utility chase, a narrow corridor of dripping pipes and flickering emergency bulbs, the air musty with mold and river seepage. Footsteps echoed from the main hall, muffled, deliberate, the intruder's boots splashing through a deliberate puddle left by tampered seals. Elena's flashlight beam danced over rusted grates, her free hand tracing the wall for the access panel. Sensory overload hit. The drip-drip of leaks, the faint hum of jammed security radios, the distant crack of a suppressed shot. False alarm or real hit. Russo's breath was even behind her, his presence a shield in a cage. They reached the junction, a grated overlook into the docks where shadows moved under sodium lights now flickering erratically. The boat bobbed, ropes unsecured, 3 figures in dark rain gear hauling crates. Shipping manifests, perhaps, laced with whatever cargo fueled Russo's empire. One turned, spotting the grate, raising a weapon. Elena's pulse spiked as Russo pulled her down, the shot pinging off metal, sparks flying like fireflies in the storm. "Go," he whispered, firing back, controlled bursts that scattered the men without pursuit, buying seconds. They scrambled down a ladder into the underbelly, the environment turning hazardous. Water pooling ankle-deep from a breached pipe. The floor slick with algae, jammed exits forcing a detour through a flooded subtunnel. Elena's boots slipped, cold seeping through denim. But she pressed on, calculating flow rates in her head. Natural surge or staged diversion. Emerging into a side warehouse, they burst through a loading door into the pounding rain. Russo's armored SUV idled there, a loyal guard at the wheel, engine rumbling like salvation. They piled in, tires spinning mud as it peeled away, headlights cutting the downpour. In the rear view, the safe house receded, flames licking its lower edge. A staged fire, accelerant from the boat, the East Side's message clear, no sanctuary. Panting, Elena wiped rain from her eyes, the ledger clutched in her lap like a hot coal. Russo leaned close, his shoulder against hers. The contact a vow amid the chaos. "You held," he said, voice rough with something deeper than gratitude. Trust forged in the dark, a bond testing her ethics against his power. But as the SUV merged onto the river road, her phone lit up. A text from an unknown number, coordinates to her warehouse with a single line. "Wall won't save you now." The river churned beside them, black and unforgiving, whispering of betrayals yet to surface. Who had the burner code to her alerts, and what grudge had the flood truly unleashed? The SUV barreled down the river road, wipers slashing rhythmically against the relentless downpour, each pass revealing glimpses of the churning water that flanked them like a living barrier. Elena's phone screen glowed in her lap, the anonymous text burning into her vision. Coordinates pinpointing her warehouse, the threat as blunt as a breached levee. The air inside the vehicle was heavy with wet wool and adrenaline, the guard at the wheel gripping the steering column white-knuckled, his eyes darting to the mirrors every few seconds. Victor Russo sat beside her, the ledger tucked under his arm, his jaw set like reinforced concrete. The scar on his throat caught the dashboard light, a pale reminder of vulnerabilities he rarely exposed. "Give me that," Russo said, voice cutting through the engine's low roar. He took the phone without waiting, scrolling the message with a thumb that betrayed no tremor. The coordinates were precise, her floodwall's exact weak spot, the one she'd patched after the surge. "Burner number," he muttered, forwarding it to his own secure line. "East Side sloppy, but persistent. They know your setup because someone talked." Elena leaned forward, the leather seat sticking to her damp clothes, the faint scent of scorched rubber from the safe house fire still clinging to them. Talked? Who? Her mind raced through the day's fragments. The offline gauge, the van's partial plate, the waiter's mismatched badge at dinner. Institutional limits, she thought. City records public enough for rivals to map her work. But this felt personal, a grudge amplified by the flood's chaos. The guard cleared his throat, radio crackling to life. "Boss, we've got a tail, 2 vehicles, hanging back at the junction. Plate on the lead, starts with 47, matches the van from earlier." The words hung, a confirmation of the pursuit that had dogged them since the pier. Russo's eyes narrowed, the possessiveness in his posture sharpening as he glanced at Elena, as if she were the asset most at risk. "Lose them," he ordered. The SUV surged, tires hydroplaning briefly on the slick asphalt before finding grip, veering into a narrow access lane that hugged the river's curve. Sodium lights from distant docks flickered like faulty sensors, casting erratic shadows that played tricks on the eyes. They emerged onto a secondary bridge, the structure groaning under the storm's assault, railings slick with spray. Elena's stomach twisted at the height, the water below a roiling black mass, foam whitecaps slamming against pilings with the smell of salt and decay rising through the vents. "This isn't just about your mansion," she said, turning to Russo. "The diversion upstream, that was targeted. My wall held because I overbuilt it, but if they'd hit harder." Autonomy clashed with the security he offered, her ethics recoiling at the web of betrayals, yet curiosity pulled her deeper, like the river's undertow. Russo opened the ledger under the passing glow of a street lamp, pages rustling like dry leaves. Discreet entries filled the margins, shipping manifests coded in shorthand, dates aligning with the storms, diversions noted as ES interference, East Side initials scrawled beside tonnage figures that didn't match official logs. "Here," he said, tapping a line. 3 weeks back, a barge rerouted cargo, fertilizer on paper, but laced with precursors for their side deals. My man on the manifest flagged it, but the driver ghosted after. Same one from tonight. His voice carried the weight of legacy, a code forged from loss. A partner betrayed years ago, washed away in a staged accident, vowing he'd never let rivals drown the innocent in their ambitions. The SUV braked hard, swinging into an underground garage beneath a nondescript high-rise, Russo's contingency, Elena guessed, far from the mansion's exposed cliffs. Concrete pillars loomed, echoing the engine's whine as they descended, the air cooling to a sterile hum laced with oil and exhaust. Guards materialized from alcoves, earpieces buzzing with updates. Perimeter clear, but feeds show activity at her warehouse. Scouts, not assault. Russo stepped out first, hand extended to Elena, the gesture protective yet insistent, testing her independence like pressure on a fault line. Inside the penthouse level, the space unfolded in controlled luxury, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the storm-lashed river, but reinforced with one-way glass that turned the outside world into a monitored diorama. A wall of screens hummed back to life, displaying live feeds, her warehouse under sodium glow, the flood wall scarred but vigilant, a figure in a hooded jacket lingering near the gate, phone to ear. The smell of fresh coffee mingled with the faint tang of electronics, a side table holding a secure tablet linked to dock cams. Elena approached the screens, tracing the intruder's path with her eyes, subtle tells, pacing too methodically, glancing at a watch, not the water. "That's no random scout," she said. "Guard rotation at my site, city hires, but one overlaps with your manifests. Maria mentioned a new face last week, asking about the build." Betrayal's thread tightened, human error in vetting allowing infiltration, the flood's chaos a perfect cover for old grievances resurfacing. Russo joined her, his shoulder brushing hers in the tight space, loyalty versus fear playing out in the silence. "We'll pull him. But you, stay here tonight. The wall's your legacy, but my code covers what's mine now." The words hung possessive, a pledge amid the rising stakes, clashing with her need to stand alone, to reinforce her own barriers. She shook her head, pulse quickening as thunder rattled the glass. "I don't belong to anyone, but if we're tracing this, I need access, your logistics, my sensors." Trust versus suspicion simmered, the bond from the blackout forging something tentative, a found alliance against the organized threat. A alert pinged on the tablet, intercepted message from the burner. "Wall secure, but engineer with Russo. Hit the tunnel access at dawn." The East Side's plan crystallized, rivals closing in with vehicle plates and access codes poached from turncoats. Russo's face hardened, dialing a secure line. Double the convoy. No mistakes. As the rain lashed the windows, Elena wondered if the true flood was the one eroding the lines between her world and his. But who was the turncoat pulling the strings from within? And would dawn bring extraction or entrapment? The penthouse thrummed with the low pulse of contingency systems, the reinforced windows vibrating under the storm's assault, as if the river itself were clawing at the glass. Elena stood transfixed by the tablet's screen, the intercepted message glowing like a fault line in concrete. "Wall secure, but engineer with Russo. Hit the tunnel access at dawn. The coordinates matched her warehouse's underbelly, where old flood drains snaked into the riverbed. Vulnerable points she'd sealed with makeshift grates, but nothing impenetrable to determine saboteurs. The air carried the sterile bite of recycled oxygen, undercut by the earthy dampness seeping from the garage below, a reminder that even high ground couldn't fully escape the water's reach. Russo paced the room's perimeter, his footsteps muffled on the thick rug, the ledger now open on the side table amid scattered printouts of manifest discrepancies. His shadow stretched long under the halogen lamps, the scar at his throat catching the light like a etched warning. "Dawn's 4 hours out," he said, voice clipped, dialing another burner phone with practiced efficiency. Convoys assembling, armored escorts, drone overwatch. But the turncoat. That's internal rot. He glanced at her, eyes dark pools of calculation mixed with something fiercer, possessiveness laced with reluctant admiration, as if her refusal to yield had rewritten his code just a fraction. Elena crossed to the window, pressing a palm against the cool glass, watching the river's black ribbon twist below. Lightning forked across the skyline, illuminating barges moored at the docks, their hulls creaking like strained joints. "Internal how?" "Your driver's gone, but the message mentions the engineer." "Me." "Someone's pieced it from surveillance. Maybe those city rotation logs I filed for permits." Her mind mapped the logistics. Access codes for her sensors poached from a shared contractor database. Human error in password hygiene, allowing rivals to burrow in like floodwater through cracks. Autonomy burned in her chest, clashing with the security he dangled, the promise of resources to fortify her world against his. But trust? That was a bridge still trembling underfoot. He stepped behind her, close enough that his warmth cut the chill, his hand hovering near her shoulder without touching, a gesture of restraint, his personal vow against forcing allegiance. "The East Side's been bleeding my routes for months. That fertilizer barge? Cover for their chem runs, but the manifest clerk, my uncle's old contact, signed off on the reroute. Behavioral tell. He called in sick the day after the flood. Burner traces leading to a safe house in their territory." Russo's tone carried the weight of legacy, a past loss echoing in the pause. The uncle, perhaps, swept away in a rival's staged wreck years back, forging his rule to protect kin from the undertow of ambition. "I don't hit innocence, Elena, but betrayal, that demands balance." The tablet pinged again, a live feed from a dock camera flickering to life. The hooded figure at her warehouse gate, now joined by 2 others, their forms huddled under the sodium haze, gesturing at the flood wall's base. One knelt, probing the concrete with a tool that glinted. Drill or scanner, testing for weak seams. The rain sheeted down, turning the asphalt into a mirror of distorted lights, the distant hum of generators underscoring their infiltration like a conspirator's whisper. Elena's pulse quickened, ethics warring with prudence. She could call Maria, evacuate the neighbors, but that would expose the threat wider, inviting institutional chaos from underfunded city response teams. "We move now," she said, turning to face him, the push-pull electric in the charged air. "My sensors have a backup relay. Ping them from here. Confirm the tunnel's compromised. If they're drilling at dawn, it's to flood the lowlands again. Blame it on natural surge while they skim your shipments." Independence flared, but so did the bond from the blackout, a tentative alliance where his power amplified her ingenuity. Russo nodded, pulling up a secure map on the tablet, layered overlays of river tunnels, guard rotations marked in red, east side assets circled like storm cells. "Smart, but you're not going alone." His voice dropped, possessive edge sharpening. "This code of mine? It covers you now. No arguments." The words tested her, loyalty versus fear coiling tight. But Elena saw the crack, his eyes flicking to the ledger, where a faded photo clipped to a page showed a younger him with the uncle, arms around a boy who might have been a son, lost to the same currents that shaped his restraint. They descended in a private elevator, the descent smooth but laden, emerging into the garage where the convoy idled. 3 black SUVs, engines purring, flanked by a tech van humming with drone controls. Guards in tactical vests nodded, earpieces crackling with perimeter checks. The air hit like a wall, damp concrete and exhaust, the river's brine infiltrating even here. Elena slid into the lead vehicle with Russo, the door sealing with a hydraulic sigh. As they peeled out, tires gripping the slick ramp, she activated her phone's relay app, the screen blooming with data. Tunnel pressure spiking, water levels rising unnaturally, staged diversion, pumps hidden upstream, natural causes twisted by criminal hands. The convoy snaked through the night, headlights carving tunnels of light amid the downpour. The river road a gauntlet of puddles and deceptive calm. In the rear view, no tails yet, but Elena spotted the anomaly, a service van idling at a junction, its plate starting with 47, the east side's sloppy signature. Russo's radio buzzed. "Drones up, boss. Activity at the warehouse. Drilling confirmed, but we've got eyes on the crew." Tension escalated, the environment turning hazardous as thunder boomed, a false alarm of lightning masking a distant engine rev. They reached the warehouse district, just as dawn grayed the horizon, the flood wall looming like a scarred sentinel, its concrete glistening under the first weak light. Guards fanned out, silent as shadows, while Elena and Russo approached on foot, the mud sucking at their boots with wet smacks. The hooded figures scattered at the sight, but one lagged. The new city guard, face pale under the hood, dropping a scanner that clattered to the ground. "Wait," Elena called, voice steady despite the adrenaline surge. But Russo's hand shot out, restraining her as his men closed in. The guard spun, eyes wild, fumbling for a phone, burner no doubt to signal the tunnel hit. A scuffle ensued, muffled grunts and the crackle of tasers. No blood spilled, just the efficient takedown of a turncoat exposed by his own haste. Elena knelt by the scanner, its screen displaying her wall's schematics, hacked from public bids, but annotated with East Side codes. "He fed them the rotations," she said, rising, the revelation bitter. Victory's cost, exposure of her freelance network, neighbors now in the crosshairs. Russo pulled her back as the convoy's techs swarmed the tunnel access, sealing it with portable barriers, the hum of pumps reversing the diversion. But as the first rays pierced the clouds, a new alert buzzed. Another message, this one to Russo's line. "Engineer saved the wall, but the mansion's next. Pay the debt." The true threat organized, rivals closing the noose with infiltrated ledgers and behavioral slips unmasked too late. In the rising light, Elena met Russo's gaze. The bond solidified amid the mud and menace. But the river's whisper promised more floods, of betrayal and choices yet to crest. What debt did the East Side claim, and would sealing one breach open another in the heart of his empire? If this tale already has you hooked, hit the like button. It helps us bring more hidden stories to light. The dawn light filtered through the thinning clouds like a reluctant witness, painting the warehouse district in muted grays and golds, the river's surface now a deceptive mirror, hiding its churning depths. Elena stood amid the mud-slicked gravel, the captured guard scanner clutched in her hand, its screen cracked but still humming with damning data, her walls blueprints overlaid with East Side annotations, access codes scribbled in hasty digital notes. The air hung heavy with the scent of wet earth and diesel, undercut by the faint acrid tang from the sealed tunnel pumps reversing their sabotage. Guards hauled the turncoat away, his wrists zip-tied, muttering denials that dissolved into the morning haze, but Elena's focus sharpened on Russo's phone, the new message searing. "Engineer saved the wall, but the mansion's next. Pay the debt." Russo pocketed the device, his face a mask of controlled fury, the scar at his throat pulsing faintly with his quickened breath. "Debt," he echoed, voice low and edged like a blade against stone. He turned to the tech swarming the flood wall's base, their tools whirring as they reinforced the grates with fresh welds, the sparks dancing like fireflies in the growing light. What do they think they own? That diversion was theirs. Upstream pumps to erode my cliffs, skim my roots while the city blamed the storm. His eyes met Elena's, the possessiveness there tempered by a flicker of vulnerability, as if her ingenuity had cracked his armor just enough to let trust seep in. But autonomy burned in her reply. She wouldn't be claimed like territory, not even by a man whose code mirrored her own stubborn legacy. "The debt's old," Elena said, stepping closer to the wall, her boots sinking into the soft ground where water still pooled in shallow divots. She traced a finger along a hairline crack. Stress from the night's pressure, not failure. Her engineer's eye cataloging the logistics. The East Side's infiltration via the manifest clerk. Behavioral tells like the guard's hesitant glance during rotations. Human error in vetting, allowing the rot to spread. That ledger photo. Your uncle? If they hit him years back with a staged wreck, this is payback. Your mansion's the symbol, but the real plays the docs. Manifests show reroutes aligning with my build dates. They used the flood prep as cover to scout. Sensory details assaulted her. The distant lap of the river against pilings. The hum of security radios crackling with convoy updates. The chill dampness clinging to her skin like an uninvited grasp. Russo nodded, pulling her aside as the convoy's lead SUV idled nearby, its engine a throaty rumble vibrating through the gravel. He was family, drowned in their accident to muscle the east routes. I swore no innocents pay for ambition, but they've twisted it. Elena, the mansion's got secondary defenses, generators, barriers, but if they're pumping again... His hand grazed her elbow, protective instinct clashing with her independence, the push-pull a live wire in the charged air. Loyalty versus fear simmered. She saw the cost in his eyes, a past loss shaping choices that now entangled her world with his. "We check the cliffs," she decided, voice firm, pocketing the scanner. "My sensors can relay upstream flow, link them to your tablet. If the pumps are active, we trace the power lines. City grid limits mean they're drawing from a hidden generator, probably in an abandoned warehouse. No easy solutions. Victory would demand exposure, racing institutional blind spots and rival surveillance." Russo's gaze held hers, suspicion yielding to alliance, the bond from the blackout and capture forging something deeper, a found partnership where her prudence balanced his restrained power. The convoy mobilized, SUVs forming a tight phalanx as they peeled away from the warehouse. Tires churning mud into the river road. Elena rode shotgun in the lead vehicle, tablet balanced on her knee, the screen blooming with overlaid maps. River currents in blue veins, east side assets marked red from intercepted burner pings. The guard at the wheel, loyal, vetted, eyed the mirrors, radio buzzing. "No tails yet, boss." But drone feed shows activity at the old east dock. Van matching the 47 plate. Thunder grumbled distantly, a false alarm as the sun climbed, but the environment turned hazardous. Fog rolling off the water, visibility dropping to ghostly outlines of barges and cranes, the road slick with residual floodwater that mirrored the tension coiling in her gut. They veered toward the cliffs, the mansion coming into view like a wounded titan, its glass facade scarred by erosion, temporary shipping container barriers stacked along the undercut bank, guards patrolling with the rhythmic click of boots on wet stone. The air thickened with brine and machinery oil, the hum of backup generators underscoring the scene like a warning pulse. Elena hopped out first, linking her sensors via a portable relay, data streaming, pressure spikes upstream, unnatural surges confirming the pumps, staged, powered by a diesel line siphoned from municipal backups, criminal logistics exploiting natural storm cover. "Found it," she said, pointing to the tablet as Russo joined her at the cliff's edge. The overlook dropped sharply to the river, foam churning below, the smell of wet rock rising sharp. "Warehouse 2 miles up, abandoned since the last flood, perfect for their setup. Vehicle plates from drone, 47X confirmed, plus a flatbed for the pumps." Russo's jaw tightened, dialing orders, Infiltrate quiet. Cut the line. No shots. But as his men moved, a new alert flashed. Camera feed from the mansion's perimeter. A compromised guard, one of his own, gesturing subtly to shadows in the tree line. Phone to ear with a behavioral tell. Averted eyes. Too stiff posture. Another turncoat, Russo growled, the revelation hitting like a structural failure. Internal betrayal deepened, the East Side's web tightening with access codes and ledgers poached from within. Elena's pulse raced, ethics straining against the pull of his world, the code that protected but possessed, her independence tested as he shielded her from the drop. "We end this at the warehouse," he said, voice rough with vow. "Together." They piled back into the SUV, convoy accelerating toward the target, fog swallowing the road ahead. But in the rear view, headlights bloomed, trailing cars emerging from the mist, a botched escort turning into ambush, jammed signals cutting drone overwatch. The river roared beside them, black and insistent, as the first shots cracked, suppressed, distant, the environment's haze a conspirator in the rising chaos. What hidden pump would burst the final barrier, and could their fragile trust hold against the flood of organized vengeance? The fog clung to the river road like a shroud, thickening with every mile as the convoy tore toward the abandoned warehouse, headlights piercing the mist in frantic beams that revealed only glimpses of twisted guardrails and foaming water below. Elena's hands tightened on the tablet, its screen flickering under the SUV's erratic swerves. Data streams confirming the upstream pump's relentless churn. Diesel generators hidden in the derelict structure, siphoning power from overlooked grid taps, their output flooding the cliffs in a calculated erosion. The air inside the vehicle was stifling, laced with the sharp tang of gun oil from the guards' suppressed rifles and the metallic bite of fear sweat. Victor Russo sat rigid beside her, his burner phone pressed to his ear, barking clipped orders into the static. Flank the trail, drones blind, so eyes only. No civilians in the cross. The first shots cracked again, closer now, muffled pops echoing off the water like stones skipping across ice. The trailing cars, two sedans, plates obscured in the haze, gained, their engines roaring defiance. East Side reinforcements closing the noose with the precision of a manifest ledger gone rogue. Elena's pulse thundered in her ears, the push-pull of Russo's world yanking her deeper. His possessiveness a shield that both protected and confined, her autonomy fracturing under the weight of shared peril. "The warehouse is 1/2 mile," she said, voice steady despite the adrenaline surge. Mapping the assault in her mind. Access points via rusted loading docks, guard rotations likely thin from the fog's cover, human error in their overconfidence after the night's small wins. Russo's hand found hers briefly, a squeeze that spoke of vows under pressure. His code, forged from the uncle's watery grave, now extending to her like an unbreakable beam. "Stay low," he murmured, eyes locked on the rear view where the guard floored it, the SUV fishtailing through a puddle that sprayed like shrapnel. The convoy splintered, one vehicle peeling off to intercept, tires screeching as it broadsided the lead pursuer in a crunch of metal and shattering glass. No fatalities, just the chaos of jammed exits and spinning wheels buying precious seconds. The environment turned lethal, fog condensing on the windshield, wipers slashing futilely, the river's roar masking the whine of bullets ricocheting off the chassis. They burst through the warehouse gates, the chain link rattling like a death knell, the structure looming as a skeletal hulk of corroded steel and shattered windows, its underbelly humming with the generator's diesel growl. Guards spilled out, fanning into the mist with tactical lights cutting swaths, the air thick with the stench of rust, stagnant water, and illicit fuel. Elena followed Russo inside, tablet clutched like a talisman, her boots splashing through ankle-deep pools from leaky roofs, natural seepage or deliberate sabotage. Shadows danced under sodium bulbs strung haphazardly, illuminating crates stamped with falsified manifests. Fertilizer bags concealing chem precursors, the East Side's side hustle exposed in plain sight. A figure emerged from the gloom, the manifest clerk, face gaunt under a flickering light, wrench in hand as if mid-repair, but his eyes betrayed the tell. Dilated pupils, a subtle tremor, the mark of a cornered man. "Victor," he rasped, voice cracking like the foundation under flood. "It wasn't personal. They promised the roots, after your uncle took ours." The revelation landed like a structural collapse. Organized vengeance, the debt a cycle of betrayals traced back decades, upstream diversions not just erosion but a grudge weaponized through infiltrated ledgers and burner networks. Russo halted, rifle raised but steady, his code holding the trigger. A vow against innocence, even turncoats with blood ties. Elena scanned the pumps, massive shadows throbbing in the corner, hoses snaking toward the river like veins. "Cut the line here," she directed a guard, pointing to the power feed. Exposed wiring, vulnerable to a simple severance, no high-tech needed, just credible work amid the institutional neglect of abandoned sites. The clerk lunged, desperation twisting his features, but Russo sidestepped, tackling him to the wet concrete with a thud that echoed through the rafters. No shots fired. Instead, zip ties snapped on, the man's confessions spilling in the scuffle. East Side boss pulling strings from a penthouse across the bay, vehicle plates and access codes traded for loyalty, the flood's chaos a perfect smokescreen for their power grab. Outside, the trailing cars screeched to a halt, engines dying as Russo's reinforcements swarmed. Sirens wailing in the distance, city response finally stirred by the jammed radios and staged diversions gone awry. But victory's cost crashed in. A guard slumped against a crate, shoulder grazed by a stray round, blood seeping dark through his vest. Injury, not death, but a stark reminder of exposure. Elena knelt by the pumps as they sputtered to silence, the flow reversing with a gurgle, the river's threat ebbing like a receding tide. Russo rose, breathing hard, the ledger now complete in his grasp. Secrets secured, but the mansion's fate hanging by eroded threads. Repairs demanding sacrifice of time and trust. As the fog lifted under the climbing sun, they emerged into light that warmed the scarred cliffs, the mansion standing defiant, its barriers holding against the final surge. Russo turned to Elena, the possessiveness softened to something profound. A pledge in his gaze, not ownership, but partnership, the true treasure unearthed in the muck. Protection woven from mutual codes, trust forged in blackouts and betrayals, a found family rising from the waters that had claimed so much. Her independence remained, but enriched, the adventure's legacy outlasting the spoils of power, loyalty and memory, anchors stronger than any wall. The river flowed on, sullen and spent, its whispers silence for now. In the quiet aftermath, Elena realized the flood had washed away illusions, leaving only what endured. A bond that turned rivals' debts into shared strength and a future where autonomy and alliance coexisted, unyielding as the dawn. Subscribe to our channel for more incredible tales of loyalty, danger, and found family. See you in the next story.